During this portion of your training, we will go over incident reporting and mandatory notifications. By the end of this training, you will understand what an incident is and who needs to report them. You will understand what situations require an incident report, which incident reports are considered serious or not serious. We will go over incident reporting steps for normal and serious incident reports. We'll provide some clarity on abuse and neglect, and then we'll give some helpful reminders when it comes to incident reporting. The purpose of these reports is to prevent children and adults from being abused, to end any possible abuse or neglect at the earliest possible stage, to promote the health, safety, and well-being of people with developmental disabilities, to ensure communication between the responsible person or guardian, the state or DDD, and the service provider, which is us at Ohana. And lastly, to identify trends so they can be assessed. For example, let's say we work at a home for teenage boys and we start to notice a trend where on Sunday nights before school, there might be a little bit more action, a little bit more potential for an incident to occur. If we report this to the state and the guardian is also aware, we may be able to better serve this member by, for example, providing an additional staff at that time. Here's the list of situations that would require a standard incident report. I've highlighted the ones that apply for standard incident reporting. So you have property damage under $10,000. So this could be if someone puts a hole in a wall, if they're very upset, if someone breaks someone else's toy, something along those lines. An out of the ordinary event that could have a negative impact on health or well-being, but is not currently having that impact. Injuries, if someone falls and scrapes their arm. Violation of rights, which you'll learn about in Article 9. Fraud. Complaints. Theft or missing property under $1,000. Medication errors. Community disturbance. Or provider, drug, or substance use. If any of these standard incidents happen while you're at one of the homes, here are some action steps to take. First, you need to ensure the safety of everyone involved. So this means you need to take whatever steps necessary to make sure everyone is safe. This could mean if the incident occurs in the car, pulling the car over. If the incident requires you to use a physical restraint because someone is in immediate danger to themselves or others, that's what you would do there. This also may include calling 911, crisis, or taking other emergency actions, as I mentioned before, with one of those physical restraints. Second, you'll complete a written report as soon as possible, but before the end of your shift, and send it to your immediate supervisor. If an incident happens at, let's say, 9:45 and you're scheduled to get off at 10, you still need to follow this timeline. You might need to stay late in that scenario, but it's very important that you complete the report and send it to your supervisor before you leave the house. The reason for that strict timeline is number 3, Ohana must provide the written report to DDD or the state by the close of the next business day. Ohana also must provide a copy of the report to the responsible person or the guardian per the ISP. If something happens at the house while you're there and you're not sure if it's a serious incident report or not, and it's not going to be on the list that we see on the next slide, your job is to write that incident report and let your supervisor determine the classification of it. So here's the list of serious incident reports. So this could include death, severe personal injury, someone breaks their arm or leg while you're on shift, property damage in excess of $10,000, newsworthy events. So something happens that would require like ABC or Fox News to come out to the house, potentially dangerous situations due to neglect, allegations of abuse or neglect, a missing person if someone runs off and you're unable to locate them, media coverage. So let's say you're at the mall and something happens and a a news crew is there for whatever reason, you think they might have seen the incident that took place, this would be considered a serious incident report. Allegations of inappropriate sexual behavior. Theft or missing property in excess of $1,000. A use of emergency measures. So this is one of those physical restraints that we were talking about earlier. Threats to the health, safety, or welfare of others. Unplanned hospitalization. So if someone goes in for a scheduled surgery, that's not an unplanned hospitalization. You would not have to do a serious incident report for that. If someone gets in a car accident and needs to be hospitalized, that would be an unplanned hospitalization. Any reporting to law enforcement. And lastly, any suicide attempts or suicidal behavior. Any of those attempts or behavior also must be reported to law enforcement. Here are some additional reporting steps that need to be followed for serious incidents. First, you need to make an immediate verbal report of the incident to the correct DDD incident reporting phone number. Each house has this posted by their computer, so when you're writing the incident report, you should be able to look up and see it. Second, if applicable, notify APS, which is Adult Protective Services, or DCS, which is the Department of Child Safety, and law enforcement. Third, make a notification to the responsible person within 24 hours. This is normally the supervisor's job, but they'll let you know if that's something they're going to take care of or if that's something you should take care of. Fourth, Ohana must submit a written report to DDD no later than the close of business the next business day for any of these serious incident reports. In number 1, you will see immediate in quotes. The reason for that is immediate is defined as your first allowable opportunity that does not put yourself or others in undue risk and does not exceed 24 hours regardless of the day of week. So you need to make a notification as soon as it's safe to do so. On the list of serious incidents, you saw the words abuse and neglect mentioned a few times. If we're going to be reporting these things, it's very important that we understand the difference between the two. So, abuse can be defined as doing something you should not be doing. It's a choice that you're making. You are doing something that you should not be doing. Examples of this are physical abuse, which is hitting, kicking, pinching, slapping, or any form of sexual abuse. Emotional abuse, which is ridiculing or demeaning an individual. This could be teasing someone that you care for. This could be hurting their feelings intentionally. And lastly, programmatic abuse. This is something that's taught during Article 9, but it's the use of an aversive behavior program that has not been approved or is not part of the member's ISP. If you'll remember from Article 9, this would be using one of those yellow light techniques without approval from the state. Neglect can be defined as not doing something that you should be doing. So if you're caring for a member and they fall and hit their head and say they have a concussion and would like to see a doctor, and you say no, you need to walk it off, you are neglecting the health needs of that member. If you work in a home that has an individual that needs help using the restroom, they say they need to use the restroom and you tell them they need to wait, you are neglecting the bathroom and hygiene needs of that member, and so on. Lastly, I want to touch on abandoning the workstation. I want to emphasize that there is a form of abandoning the workstation where you're still physically present. Let's say you are working overnight shift and you decide to take a nap during your shift. This is considered shift abandonment and is a form of neglect. If you are present for or witness any of the forms of abuse or neglect mentioned previously, here are some action steps you need to take. First, you want to stop the abuse or neglect immediately. Second, you'll report the incident to your supervisor immediately. Third, you need to complete an incident report. Fourth, you'll participate in the investigation as requested, which ties in with number 5. This is reporting the incident to DDD and/or other agencies as required. So let's say you make a report to Adult Protective Services and they decide to do an investigation. maybe they'll send police to the house, maybe they'll come out to the house and they'll want to do an investigation. It's your job to participate in the investigation, answer any questions they ask you the best you can, and follow up as needed. So again, if someone comes to the house and they're checking on the member to see how they're doing, if they're safe, if they're not, you need to participate in that follow-up, participate in the investigation as requested. Here's some helpful reminders for incident reporting. So when you're writing an incident report, it's important to remember that all the details in there need to be factual, not personal opinions. So you can't write so-and-so had a bad day. You need to write what specifically happened during the day that would make you think it was a bad day. You can't write that a certain member was mad. Instead of that, you might write down things that you observed that indicate they were mad. For example, if someone wants to write that I'm upset, they might write Ben clenched his fist or Ben raised his voice. You need to include a description of the incident before, during, and after the incident occurred. So you need to set up what led to the incident, what happened during the incident, and what resolved the incident. There needs to be a resolution within the incident report. You need to include causes of injury if applicable. So if a member got in a fight with another member, if a member fell down, if a member got in a car accident, you need to write the cause of injury if there was an injury that occurred. Going back to the example of two members getting in a fight and writing an incident report, you need to complete a separate report for every individual involved. So let's say imaginary member Tommy and imaginary member Adam got in a fight with each other. You would not have Adam's name on Tommy's report and vice versa. When writing those reports, you would refer to Tommy in Adam's report as member 1 or member 2. The only member name that should be on the incident report is the name of the member who the report is written for. Lastly, if an emergency measure, it's one of those restraints you learn in crisis prevention support, was used, you need to list all interventions used before the emergency measure was utilized. So we need to be redirecting before we're restraining. This is a last resort thing when you restrain someone. So we need to make sure we're documenting that we tried things before we resulted in restraining. To review, we went over what an incident is and who needs to report it. We reviewed the purpose of incident reports. We went over the steps of incident reporting. We clarified the difference between standard and serious incident reports. We clarified the difference between abuse and neglect. And lastly, we went over some helpful reminders for incident reporting writing. Lastly, we're going to go over a well-written incident report together that's had all the names omitted from it so we can understand what a well-written incident report looks like. So, let's go over an incident report together. On the top, you'll see the member's name. You need to make sure you put the last name, the first name, and the middle initial of the member that the incident report is being written for. Here you'll see the focus ID number. This number you need to obtain from a previous incident report, which can be found in the member's binder. The birth date goes below that, and then if the member is in foster care or not. Below that, you'll see vendor name. You'll put Ohana Developmental Homes, that's us. You'll see service being provided at the time of the incident. This could be respite, this could be habilitation if you're working on a habilitation objective, this could be transportation, it could be a number of things here. Location, if it happened at the group home, you're going to put group home, which is GH. If it happened at DTA, you're going to write DTA, and so on. Site name and address, so let's say we're working at a home called Chanute Pass. What we would write here is Ohana Homes, Chanute Pass, and then we would write out the house address, including the city, the state, and the zip code. Lastly, for this top portion, we're going to write the date of the incident and the time of the incident. So let's say this one happened at 8 a.m. Below that, we'll see a section for all of the staff involved in the incident. It doesn't necessarily have to be all the staff that were present when the incident happened, but every staff that was involved in the incident. So let's say it's you that was involved in this incident. You'll write your last name, your first name, your phone number in case anyone needs to contact you regarding the incident, and your manager's full name. So let's dive into the before, during, and after portion of the incident report. So for this one, member name, you're going to type out the member's name involved in the incident, was awoken to eat breakfast and get ready for school by your name. You're going to actually write out your name here. Sometimes people write just the word staff, and those reports always get kicked back to us. It's very important that you write your name. So the member got up, went to the kitchen, then stated, "I am not going to school today because I'm having suicidal thoughts." The member then walked out the front door. This is what led up to the incident. This is when you determined, okay, we're going to have to write an incident report. So during this incident, at 8:05 a.m., let's pause. It's very important to be specific with these incident reports. So, any specific times you remember, any specific quotes that you remember are all very important to include within the incident report. So at 8:05 a.m., staff name accompanied the member out the front door and called 911 to inform them of the situation. The staff and the member walked down 35th Avenue for approximately 10 minutes before turning around and heading home. When both the staff and the member arrived home, officer name and badge number, this is important to obtain, was present. Officer name and member name talked in private, then it was determined that the member required hospitalization. At 8:20 a.m., the member was transported to a specific hospital. Below that, you'll see what could have happened to prevent the incident. It's okay to leave this blank if nothing could have prevented the incident. If something was preventable, this is where we'll type that in. This is to make us think, what could I have done differently? The type of medical intervention. So in this instance, it was hospitalization. Sometimes it's not applicable. In those cases, we would write NA here. The name of facility and address. If someone was hospitalized, it's very important that we know exactly where they're hospitalized. After you notify your supervisor, they are going to notify the parent or guardian and fill this portion in. They're also going to notify the support coordinator who works for DDD, and they are going to fill this in. That's why it's very important. One of the steps once you do an incident report is notify your supervisor, contact your supervisor, send this to your supervisor once it's completed so they can fill their portion in. Protective Services notified. If you have to notify Adult Protective Services, if you have to notify Department of Child Safety, if you have to notify Tribal Protective Services, this is where you put that information. When you're taking these incident reports, there's no such thing as too many details. They're going to want the name of the person who was notified, the time they were notified, the date, if you made the notification online, over the phone, over fax. If you made the report over the phone, you need to write out who you spoke with exactly and the report number too. If you notify law enforcement, again, details, details, details. So the name of the person notified, you will write the department, so Phoenix Police Department, and then you'd write the officer name as well. The date of notification, the time of notification, the name and badge number of the responding officer, and if applicable, the law enforcement report number. Police officers are generally very good about leaving what looks like a little business card at the home that will have their badge number and the law enforcement report number. It's important to make sure to ask for these things if a police officer is to come to one of the homes. So at the bottom, you'll see corrective action / comments. So what steps are being taken to prevent this from happening again? This is where you write the after portion. So what's happening now? So it looks like in this instance, the member was transported to this specific hospital. We would also write if they were admitted, if they were not admitted. We can also write some comments here. So if I worked the previous day and I know that something specifically happened to upset that member, I can write that in here and say, yesterday, this specific thing happened, which possibly could be contributing to this behavior or these thoughts. So that's where I can kind of fill in my personal thoughts on what happened and kind of my guess, just so the people who are reviewing these incident reports have a glimpse at the bigger picture of what's going on. At the bottom, you'll write your full name, your supervisor's name, the date and time of when you are filling out this incident report, and then you're going to send this to your manager. Again, it's very important that you send this to your manager before you leave your shift. So if this person was scheduled to leave at 8 a.m. and all this stuff happened shortly after 8 a.m. or right at 8 a.m., they need to stay and they need to see this through to the end, document it, and send it to their supervisor. So that concludes our training today on incident reporting and mandatory notifications. I hope all the questions you had were answered through this training. If not, feel free to reach out to your supervisor, reach out to me, Ben, the Quality Assurance Manager, and ask those questions. We want to set you up to succeed and hope you have a great time working with us.